What if the war shaking the modern world was not just a political dispute, but the echo of an ancient curse between two celestial bloodlines? Long before borders were drawn before the maps we know existed, two brothers stood under the desert sky, Ishmael and Isaac, sons of Abraham, the man whispered about as the friend of God. Their separation was not merely familial, it was prophetic. It ignited a rift that would spiral across millennia, carrying the weight of divine covenants and unfulfilled destinies. This isn't just history, it's a sacred cycle repeating itself, a cosmic drama rooted in the heavens but playing out on earth. In this video, we journey beyond headlines and politics into the mystical origins of the Israel-Palestine conflict. We'll unravel forgotten prophecies, esoteric truths hidden in plain sight, and the spiritual inheritance of two nations forever intertwined by fate. Whether you're a seeker of scripture or simply drawn to the hidden layers of our world, what we uncover may reshape everything you thought you knew about this ancient war. Stay close, because once the veil is lifted, you may never see the Holy Land the same way again. The roots of the Israel-Palestine conflict can be traced back thousands of years to a single man revered by both Jews and Arabs, Abraham, the spiritual patriarch of two nations. According to the Bible, God called Abraham to leave his homeland and journey to a land called Canaan. There, God made a sacred covenant with him, promising that his descendants would inherit this land. In Genesis 15:18-21, God defined this promise clearly. To your descendants I give this land from the river of Egypt to the great river, the Euphrates. This territory would later be known as Israel. But from the very beginning, a crucial question remained: which descendants? Abraham had two sons, Ishmael, born of Hagar, an Egyptian servant, and Isaac, born of his wife Sarah. Their births created a division that would echo across centuries. Though Ishmael was Abraham's firstborn, Genesis 17:19 reveals that God chose Isaac to carry the divine covenant forward. It would be through Isaac that the people of Israel would arise. This divine selection planted the seeds of rivalry. Isaac's lineage would become the Israelites. Ishmael's descendants would grow into the Arab peoples. Two brothers, two legacies, one sacred land. From a biblical perspective, the struggle between Israel and Palestine is not just about land, it is about inheritance. A spiritual inheritance that began with Abraham and has unfolded over millennia in the form of identity, destiny, and divine promise. What we witness today is not a new conflict, but the continuation of an ancient one rooted in blood prophecy and the question of who truly holds the right to the promised land. To truly understand the roots of the Israel-Palestine conflict, one must first grasp the ancient concept of the promised land, a sacred inheritance bound by prophecy, faith, and bloodline. According to the Bible, when God chose Isaac over Ishmael, he also designated Isaac's descendants, the Israelites, as the chosen people meant to inherit the land of Canaan, which would one day become Israel. After escaping slavery in Egypt, the Israelites wandered through the wilderness for 40 years under the leadership of Moses, guided by divine promise. Their journey culminated with Joshua, who led them into Canaan and oversaw its division among the 12 tribes of Israel. The Bible outlines in detail the borders of this divine inheritance, encompassing not only modern-day Israel and Palestine, but also parts of Jordan, Lebanon, Syria, and Egypt. At its heart stood Jerusalem, a city regarded as the spiritual and political center of Israelite life, seen as their eternal possession. Yet the land's legacy is not claimed by one people alone. Palestinians, primarily Arab Muslims, also hold deep ancestral and spiritual ties to this territory. Many trace their lineage back to Ishmael, Abraham's firstborn, and believe they too are rightful heirs to the land promised by God. For generations, Arab peoples have lived in what is now called Palestine, long before the modern state of Israel was formed in 1948. To them, this land is not only a birthplace, it is an identity passed down through centuries. Thus, the heart of this conflict is not merely about borders. It is a profound dispute over divine heritage identity and the question of who truly carries the legacy of Abraham in a land where history and prophecy still collide. This competing claim to the land is one of the fundamental points of contention that is driving the conflict between Israel and Palestine in the contemporary day. From the standpoint of the Bible, God himself made a promise to the Israelites that they would possess this land. On the other hand, Palestinians, who are descended from Ishmael, also consider the land to be their legal inheritance. The 12 tribes of Israel came together to establish a loose confederation of tribes after they had successful in their conquest of Canaan. Saul became the first king of Israel when the Israelites, who had been demanding a monarch for a long time, wanted one. David, a member of the tribe of Judah, ascended to the throne after his death and established Jerusalem as the political and administrative center of Israel. His son Solomon was responsible for the construction of the first temple in Jerusalem, which cemented the city's position as the spiritual core of the Jewish people. However, with Solomon's passing, the kingdom was divided into two distinct entities: the kingdom of Israel, which was located in the north, and the kingdom of Judah, which was located in the south. In the end, the Assyrians were successful in capturing the northern kingdom in the year 722 BC, while the Babylonians were successful in capturing the southern kingdom of Judah in the year 586 BC. One of the most critical turning points in the history of the Israelites was the destruction of Jerusalem and the temple, which ultimately led to the exile of the Jewish people. Jerusalem and a significant portion of the region that is now Israel were occupied by foreign forces during this time period. Despite the fact that they were now distributed over the Babylonian kingdom, the Israelites yearned to go back to their country and rebuild their temple. A profound connection between the Jewish people and the land of Israel was cultivated throughout this era of exile, and this connection is represented in biblical prophecies on the eventual restoration of Israel. Babylonian exile laid the groundwork for centuries of foreign authority over the land of Israel, which began with the Jewish people. The region that was once ruled by the Israelites became a battlefield for civilizations to fight over, beginning with the Persians and continuing through the Greeks and Romans. Despite this, the Jewish people remained steadfast in their desire to fulfill the promise that they would one day return to their country and be reestablished as a nation. Following the establishment of Roman control, the Israel-Palestine conflict underwent a significant transformation. The Romans invaded Judea in the year 63 BC and took control of the region, which included Jerusalem. When Jesus Christ was born, the country was under Roman domination, and the religious landscape of the region was about to undergo a transformation that would last for all time. Jerusalem continued to serve as the geographic center of Jewish religious activity during the time of Jesus. The Second Temple served as a representation of God's presence among his people, and Jews from all over the world traveled to the sacred city to pay their respects because of this. On the other hand, the Roman occupation generated a growing sense of bitterness among the Jewish people. A significant number of them yearned for a Messiah who would free them from their oppressors and bring back the kingdom of Israel. On the other hand, when Jesus arrived, he delivered a different message. Jesus did not lead a political uprising. Rather, he advocated for the establishment of a spiritual kingdom. His teaching was not limited to the bounds of any particular nation. Rather, it centered on the kingdom of God rather than the kingdom of Israel. After the crucifixion and resurrection of Jesus, his disciples disseminated his message throughout the Roman Empire, which coincided with the beginning of the expansion of Christianity. On the other hand, tensions between the Romans and the Jews continued to rise, which ultimately resulted in the Jewish uprising in the year AD 66. By the year AD, the Romans had put an end to the resistance and had devastated Jerusalem. 70, which took into account the Second Temple. One of the most severe blows dealt to the Jewish people was the demolition of the temple, which resulted in many of them being sent into exile once more. Jews lived in a state of diaspora for the subsequent 2 millennia without having a homeland of their own. An increasing population of Arabs who would later choose Islam as their religion after the establishment of, in the 7th century, a new power emerged in the Middle East, Islam. During this time period, the country of Israel, which was then a part of the Roman Empire, became home to a growing population of Arabs. Following the passing of the Prophet Muhammad, Arab troops spread throughout the region and conquered a significant portion of the Byzantine and Persian empires, including the territory that is now known as Israel. Muslim soldiers were successful in seizing control of Jerusalem in the year AD. By the year 638, it had developed into a significant city in the Islamic world. Not only was Jerusalem essential for Muslims because of its relationship to Judaism and Christianity, but it was also significant because of its association with the night voyage of the Prophet Muhammad. It is believed that Muhammad ascended to heaven from the Dome of the Rock during this night journey. Jerusalem became the third holiest city in Islam as a result of this occurrence, following Mecca and Medina after that. The territory that had been known as Israel in the past was now referred to as Palestine because it was under Muslim administration. As a result of the expansion of the Arab people in the region, Jerusalem emerged as a significant hub of Islamic knowledge and culture. Jews, on the other hand, continued to reside in the city and actively practice their religion, despite the fact that they remained a minority. A number of different empires, such as the Umayyads, Abbasids, Fatimids, and Ottomans, ruled different parts of Palestine throughout the course of several centuries. During this time, the region of Palestine remained under Islamic authority. The Jewish population remained relatively tiny, despite the fact that many Jews yearned to go back to the land where they had been born. Zionism, a political movement that aspired to establish a Jewish homeland in Palestine, emerged in the latter half of the 19th century, marking the next significant turning point in the struggle between Israel and Palestine. Several elements, such as the growing anti-Semitism in Europe and the desire of the Jewish people to return to the land that they believed God had promised them, were the driving forces behind the Zionist movement. The struggle between Israel and Palestine entered a new phase with the emergence of Zionism, which marked the beginning of a new chapter. Theodor Herzl, a Jewish journalist from Austria-Hungary, was the one who initiated the movement. He was of the opinion that the foundation of a Jewish state was the only way to end the persecution of Jews. The vision of Herzl struck a chord with Jews all over Europe, many of whom were confronted with growing animosity and violence. This was especially true in Russia and Eastern Europe, due to the prevalence of pogroms, which were violent uprisings directed against Jews. In 1897, Herzl was the one who convened the first Zionist Congress, which took place in Basel, Switzerland. At this Congress, the objective of establishing a Jewish homeland in Palestine was formally proposed. The Jewish people believed that Palestine was their ancient country and that they had a biblical right to return and restore it. This ambition was founded on the assumption that Palestine was indeed their ancestral homeland. Palestine was ruled by the Ottoman Empire at the time, and the most of its inhabitants were Arab Muslims. While there were some tiny populations of Christians and Jews, the majority of the population was Arab Muslims. The Zionist movement began pushing Jewish immigration to Palestine, and by the beginning of the 20th century, thousands of Jews were flocking to the country. This occurred despite the fact that the majority of the population in Palestine was Arab. Nevertheless, the expanding Jewish presence in Palestine led to tensions with the Arab population, who viewed the Jewish immigrants as a danger to their land and way of life. This led to disputes between the two groups, as both Jews and Arabs began to stake their claim to the area that is now known as Palestine. Tensions between the two groups were only going to rise in the years to come. A significant influence on the future of Palestine was exerted by the First World War, which lasted from 1914 to 1918. During the course of the war, the Ottoman Empire took the side of Germany. By the time the war was over, the Ottoman Empire had been vanquished, and its possessions were distributed among the Allied nations who had emerged victors. Britain, which had been given a mandate by the League of Nations to manage the area, came to control Palestine. British rule over Palestine was established. The publication of the Balfour Declaration in 1917 was one of the most important events that took place during this time period. In this declaration, the government of the United Kingdom expressed its support for the establishment of a national home for the Jewish people in the territory of Palestine. Despite the fact that the declaration was a significant triumph for the Zionist movement, it also stoked the flames of hatred and animosity among the Arab community. These individuals were concerned that Jewish immigration would result in the loss of their land. Between the years 1920 and 1948, Palestine was under British mandate, and during this time period, there was a significant increase in the number of Jewish people moving to the region. A significant amount of effort was put forth by the Zionist movement in order to construct Jewish colonies, establish infrastructure, and make preparations for the ultimate establishment of a Jewish state. On the other hand, as more Jews arrived in Palestine, tensions between Jews and Arabs increased, which resulted in violent clashes and uprisings. The Arab Revolt, which took place between 1936 and 1939, was the most significant of these uprisings. During this time, Palestinian Arabs rebelled against both British rule and Jewish immigration. Despite the fact that the British were ultimately successful in putting down the uprising, It served to highlight the profound divide that existed between the Jewish and Arab populations of Palestine. 6 million Jews were murdered by the Nazis in concentration camps and extermination camps across Europe during the Holocaust, which took place during World War II from 1939 to 1945. This event had a devastating impact on the Jewish people. As the horror of the Holocaust became more apparent, it became clear that Jews required a safe place where they could live without fear of being persecuted. This realization galvanized international support for the establishment of a Jewish homeland within the world. Palestine was divided into two states, one Jewish and one Arab, with Jerusalem being designated as an international city under the control of the United Nations. This decision was made in 1947 by the United Nations Conference. The Arab authorities rejected the partition plan, stating that it was unfair to the Arab community, which at the time comprised the majority of the people living in Palestine. The Jewish leaders, on the other hand, approved the proposal and accepted it. On May 14, 1948, the Jewish community in Palestine, led by David Ben-Gurion, declared the foundation of the State of Israel, notwithstanding the resistance that was expressed by Arabs. The Arab-Israeli War began the following day when Arab troops from Egypt, Jordan, Syria, Iraq, and Lebanon invaded Israel. This event marked the beginning of the conflict. Israel was victorious from the fight, yet the war had far-reaching ramifications for the international community. During the course of the conflict, hundreds of thousands of Palestinians were forced to flee their homes or were driven from them, and they eventually became refugees in Arab countries that were nearby. Since then, the topic of what should be done with the Palestinian refugees has continued to be one of the most important issues in the conflict between Israel and Palestine. In the years after the establishment of Israel in 1948, the Palestinian people have been engaged in a battle for statehood and the right to determine their own destiny. After the Six-Day War in 1967, Israel conquered the West Bank, Gaza Strip, and East Jerusalem, all of which were supposed to be a part of the Arab state, according to the United Nations partition plan. Within the context of the conflict between Israel and Palestine, the Israeli occupation of these regions has been a significant issue of contention. The Palestinians, initially led by the Palestine Liberation Organization (PLO), and later by Hamas in Gaza, have been working toward the establishment of an independent Palestinian state, with East Jerusalem serving as its capital. On the other hand, attempts to find a solution that involves two states have been unsuccessful on multiple occasions, and the conflict is still going on today. The situation has become even more complicated as a result of the construction of Israeli settlements in the West Bank. These settlements are considered illegal according to international law, but Israel continues to expand them. Within the West Bank, these settlements have resulted in the creation of a patchwork of Israeli-controlled territories, which makes it difficult to establish a Palestinian state that is consistent throughout. There have been several wars uprisings, often known as intifadas, and peace efforts as a result of the conflict. These peace efforts include the Oslo Accords, which were signed in the 1990s, as well as various international initiatives. Yet despite decades of negotiation and global attention, the core issues at the heart of the Israel-Palestine conflict, borders, refugees, settlements, and the status of Jerusalem, remain unresolved. For many Christians, this is more than just a political or humanitarian crisis. It is deeply spiritual, a living echo of ancient biblical prophecies. The Bible speaks extensively of Israel, its people, and the end times, leading many to believe that the modern conflict is part of a divine plan unfolding before our eyes. One of the most cited prophecies is found in Ezekiel 36:37, where God promises to restore the land of Israel and gather his people from exile. For countless believers, the rebirth of Israel in 1948 was the fulfillment of that very promise. The ongoing tensions and wars to them are not random, they are signs of the last days. Further prophecy in Ezekiel 38:39 describes the war of Gog and Magog, a future invasion of Israel by a coalition of nations. Many interpret this as a coming event involving modern powers like Iran and Russia, which they believe will precede the return of Christ in the establishment of God's kingdom on earth. However, while some see divine destiny in every development, others caution against reading prophecy in every political headline. The Bible, they remind us, also calls believers to be peacemakers, to pursue justice and compassion for all people, both Jews and Palestinians. Understanding the biblical roots of this conflict can bring deeper insight. But prophecy is not a call to passivity or division. It is an invitation to wisdom, compassion, and hope. While human solutions remain complex and fragile, the ultimate resolution lies in the hands of a God whose plan for Israel-Palestine and the world is still unfolding one chapter at a time, whether through diplomacy or divine intervention.